"Ma'am, you holding up the line, you don't get any special treatment, black woman. I have a plane to fly," the pilot says to the elderly woman. He doesn't know in a few minutes he'll regret those lines. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more jaw-dropping stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to our main character. They said she was slowing the line. That was the first complaint whispered at gate A17. An elderly black woman, walking with a cane, moving inch by inch toward the counter, while the crowd behind her sighed in impatience. Her name was Ms. Loretta Hayes. 74 years old. Dressed in a faded blue cardigan and soft church hat that looked older than most of the passengers in line. She had arthritis in both knees, the kind that makes every step feel like walking through glass. But she never asked for pity, only patience. When she finally reached the counter, she smiled at the young gate agent. "Good morning, dear. Would you mind letting me pre-board? I can't move as fast as I used to." The agent smiled politely. "Of course, ma'am, I just need to." Then the voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Not happening. We board by zone. No exceptions." Every head turned. The voice belonged to Captain Richard Cole, the man everyone called the face of Skylink Airways. He stood tall in his pristine uniform, gold stripes gleaming on his shoulders, jaw tight with authority. He didn't look angry, he looked offended. As if her request had personally insulted him. Ms. Hayes turned, her hands resting on her cane. "I'm sorry, son. I didn't mean to cause trouble. It's just these old bones." But he interrupted her, his tone sharp enough to slice through her sentence. "Ma'am, we have hundreds of passengers waiting. If we start bending rules for every person with a story, we'll never leave on time." The words "every person with a story" landed like a slap. The gate agent's face went pale. She opened her mouth to defend Ms. Hayes, but the captain raised a hand, a silent command that said, "Don't argue with me." Ms. Hayes nodded gently, the corners of her mouth trembling into a polite smile that barely held. "I understand," she said softly. "I've spent a lifetime waiting my turn. If this moment already makes your heart tighten, tap like, it tells the algorithm this story matters." And with that, she stepped aside, leaning hard on her cane. The line moved again. The whispers resumed. But the energy had changed. No one saw the tears she blinked away, or how she rubbed her knees quietly, the pain flaring worse when she tried to sit. No one, except one young flight attendant watching from the gate. She saw it all. Minutes later, the boarding announcement echoed. First class, business class, Skylink Platinum members. The privileged groups. When Ms. Hayes finally boarded, it was nearly last. Each step up the jet bridge felt heavier than the one before. Her breath came slow and shallow, the ache pulsing through her legs like a heartbeat. But she made it. Inside the cabin, the pilot was greeting passengers, firm handshake for a white businessman in a tailored suit, a nod for a social media influencer filming herself, a smile for the airline's regional director seated in 1C. Then he saw her. She was standing by seat 1A, the first seat in the first row, nearest the cockpit. His smile disappeared. "Ma'am," he said, the words stiff with suspicion. "That seat's reserved." She turned to him gently. "Yes, I know. It's mine." He stared at her. Then at her ticket. A beat of silence. Then a small, disbelieving laugh. "You must have been upgraded by mistake. Let's get you settled where you belong." She didn't move. "I belong right here, Captain." His expression hardened. "We don't have time for games. Please take your proper seat before I call security." Around them, the air seemed to freeze. The regional director in 1C looked away. The influencer's camera stopped recording. The young flight attendant's eyes filled with quiet panic. Ms. Hayes said nothing. She simply eased herself into the seat, her cane resting against her leg, her arthritic hands folding neatly in her lap. "Ma'am," the captain snapped, "I'm not asking again." She looked up at him with tired eyes, the kind that had seen centuries of men just like him. "Tell me, Captain," she said softly, "how many times have you looked at someone and decided they didn't belong before you even knew their name?" He frowned, not expecting that question. "Excuse me?" She smiled faintly. "You heard me." He exhaled sharply, jaw clenching. "Security will handle this." And with that, he turned and walked back toward the cockpit. Phones were already out. A few passengers whispered under their breath. "She's in the wrong seat." No, her ticket looked real. Who is she, anyway? No one had an answer. Ms. Hayes sat still, rubbing her knees quietly as the pain climbed up her legs. But the look on her face had changed. It wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was resolve. If this moment already broke your heart, tap like. It helps stories like this reach more people who still believe respect should board first. She whispered to herself, "My mother used to say, when people show you what they think you're worth, let them. Just make sure they see the receipt later." No one heard her. Not yet. But before this flight reached Dubai, every person on that plane, from the captain to the last passenger in economy, would learn exactly who Ms. Loretta Hayes was. And when they did, one man's arrogance would cost him everything. When the captain walked back toward the cockpit, the whispers started. Not the loud, confrontational kind, the quiet, poisonous kind that spreads faster than truth. She must have snuck up front. I heard she faked her ticket. Poor thing probably can't even afford economy. Every lie was whispered softly enough to sound harmless and loud enough to sting. Ms. Hayes sat motionless, her hands resting on her cane, eyes fixed on the seatbelt sign that hadn't even turned on yet. To anyone watching, she looked calm, but her knees throbbed like live coals. The arthritis always punished her when stress hit. Still, she kept her posture straight, chin lifted, every inch of her carrying a quiet dignity that no one seemed to notice. The head flight attendant, Elena, hesitated near the galley. She'd flown with Captain Cole before. She knew his moods, strict, proud, dismissive. But this felt different. There was something uglier behind it this time, something meaner than protocol. She whispered to her colleague, "I think the woman's ticket is legit." Her colleague shrugged. "Then you tell him. I'm not risking my job for that." Elena exhaled. The cabin smelled of coffee, perfume, and tension. She walked to Ms. Hayes' seat, lowered her voice. "Ma'am, would you like a glass of water while we sort this out?" Ms. Hayes smiled. "That would be kind, thank you." Elena hesitated before leaving. There was something about the woman's composure, too still, too knowing. Most people crumble when humiliated publicly. This one didn't flinch. By the time Elena returned with the water, the captain's voice echoed through the cabin from the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be departing shortly. Please remain seated." He didn't address the situation. He didn't apologize. He simply reclaimed control, the kind of control built on intimidation, not leadership. But the passengers had seen enough. The businessman in 1C kept glancing between the captain and Ms. Hayes, his jaw tight. He'd been silent when it happened at the gate. Now he wasn't sure why he hadn't said anything. As the plane taxied onto the runway, Ms. Hayes closed her eyes. Each vibration of the engine sent a dull ache through her legs. She whispered quietly, a prayer between breaths. "Lord, give me patience for the ignorant and grace for the proud." When the wheels lifted off, everyone clapped, the polite kind of clapping reserved for good pilots and safe flights. But Ms. Hayes didn't clap. She just looked out the window, the city shrinking beneath clouds, and whispered, "The higher they rise, the harder they'll see the truth fall." Captain Cole sat in the cockpit, jaw tight. He couldn't shake the unease that crept up his spine. Something about that woman's calmness bothered him. People accused wrongly usually argued, cried, or pleaded. She had done none of that. She had waited. Probably just stubborn, he muttered, flipping switches. But the thought stuck anyway. 20 minutes into the flight, the purser knocked lightly on the cockpit door. "Captain, passenger 1's ticket has been verified by the system again. It's legitimate." He frowned. "Run it again manually." "I did." "Same result." He scoffed. "Then someone in corporate's asleep at their desk. Maybe she won a radio contest. Just keep her quiet until we land." The purser left. But not before muttering, "If she's not who she says she is, she's the calmest fraud I've ever seen." 2 hours into the flight, turbulence hit. Not violent, but enough to rattle cups and hearts. The captain made another announcement, his tone clipped. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We'll experience light turbulence for the next few minutes." In 1A, Ms. Hayes gripped her cane but never flinched. The businessman beside her, now visibly uneasy, leaned slightly toward her. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, why didn't you just let them move you? Not worth the scene, right?" She turned to him slowly. "What's worth depends on what you value, sir. My father was told to move once, from the front of a bus. He didn't. I suppose stubbornness runs in the family." The businessman blinked. "I didn't mean." She smiled faintly. "I know you didn't. None of them ever do." Before he could respond, a flight attendant hurried down the aisle. She whispered urgently to Elena. Something had happened at headquarters. Elena's eyes widened. She handed Ms. Hayes her water and rushed toward the cockpit. The captain was already on the radio, his voice tense. "Say that again?" The crackling reply came through the headset. "Captain Cole, corporate has requested immediate confirmation. Is a Ms. Loretta Hayes on your manifest?" He froze. "Why?" The voice on the other end hesitated. "Sir, because she just appeared on the board of directors' internal network. There's a system flag next to her name. Founder inspection in progress. Do you copy that?" Cole's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. Not according to HQ, Captain. They're asking for your flight report ASAP." He turned to his co-pilot, who had gone pale. "She can't be that Hayes. The founder died years ago." The co-pilot shook his head. "I think that was her husband. The company started under his name, but the founder was his wife." Cole's mouth went dry. Outside the cockpit door, the purser lingered, hearing fragments of the conversation. She whispered to Elena, "Did you catch that?" Elena nodded slowly. "I think we're flying with the woman who owns the airline." Rumors travel faster than sound. Within 20 minutes, the whispers had spread through first class like wildfire. They said she owned Skylink. "No way. That old lady?" "Check Twitter, someone's already posted her picture." Indeed, a blurry photo of Ms. Hayes sitting quietly in seat 1A had already found its way online. The caption read, "Elderly woman humiliated by pilot, turns out she's the founder of Skylink." It had 12,000 retweets before the plane even crossed the Atlantic. Elena approached Ms. Hayes cautiously. "Ma'am, is it true? Are you?" Ms. Hayes raised a hand gently. "Child, don't speak what others will soon find out. Truth doesn't need a microphone. It needs witnesses." Her calm unnerved everyone more than anger ever could. Back in the cockpit, Cole's headset buzzed again. "Captain Cole, this is Director Simmons from Skylink Corporate. We're receiving reports from social media about your flight. Confirm the presence of Ms. Hayes immediately." He swallowed hard. "Confirmed." There was a pause. Then the director's voice came back sharper. "Captain, you're speaking to your employer. Proceed with absolute respect and do not engage her further until we debrief." "Understood," Cole said, though his knuckles whitened on the controls. When the call ended, he slumped back. His entire body felt hollow. For years, he'd been the airline's golden man, the one they trusted for major routes, PR campaigns, executive interviews. Now, one moment of arrogance had turned him into a headline waiting to happen. He tried to convince himself she'd forgive it. She was old, after all. Maybe she wouldn't push it. But deep down, he knew better. Some people stay silent not because they're weak, but because they're building the kind of silence that ends careers. The seatbelt sign flickered off, but no one dared to move. Something in the air had changed, that strange silence before a storm. Even the sound of the engines felt muted, like the world was holding its breath. Captain Cole stepped out of the cockpit for the first time since takeoff. His face looked different now, paler, tighter around the eyes, his confidence cracking at the edges. He glanced toward 1A. She was still there, reading from her small worn Bible, one hand massaging her swollen knees under a blanket the attendants had offered. Her cane rested neatly beside her seat, the brass handle glinting in the cabin light like a silent witness. Every eye followed the captain as he walked past. Passengers could feel the tension, that strange invisible thread between guilt and consequence. He stopped beside her. "Miss Hayes," he began, his voice quieter now, "I'd like to personally apologize for any misunderstanding earlier. There was confusion with the manifest." She looked up, her face unreadable. "Was there confusion, Captain?" she asked softly. "Or was there assumption?" He swallowed. "Ma'am, I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." Her tone didn't rise, but it cut through the air with the precision of a blade. "You meant every word when you told me to wait. You meant it when you looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong. You meant it when you decided that my dignity was an inconvenience." A hush fell across the cabin. The businessman in 1C lowered his gaze. The influencer beside him put down her phone. Even the attendants froze mid-step. Miss Hayes continued, her eyes never leaving the captain's. "I've been told to move all my life, Captain. Move to the back. Move aside. Move quietly. But I learned long ago, if you move every time someone demands it, you'll never stand anywhere worth being." The captain exhaled slowly, the shame visible on his face. I understand." "No," she said gently. "You don't. But you will." She returned to her reading, her tone final. Cole lingered a moment longer, then turned back toward the cockpit, but the moment he did, the seatbelt light blinked on again, followed by a soft chime. Then the intercom crackled. "Captain Cole, please return to the cockpit immediately. Priority communication from corporate headquarters." Cole rushed inside, closing the door behind him. The co-pilot looked uneasy. "It's Director Simmons again." Line patched directly from the boardroom. Cole put on his headset. "Captain here." A cold, formal voice came through. "Captain Cole, this is Patricia Watkins, Senior Vice President of Operations. We're aware of an incident on your flight involving Ms. Loretta Hayes. Is she on board?" He hesitated. "Confirmed. Then you understand the gravity of your situation. Ms. Hayes isn't just a passenger. She's the founder and majority owner of this airline. And at this moment, your interaction with her is being discussed at executive level, live." Cole's throat tightened. "Ma'am, I had no way of knowing." "That's exactly the problem," she interrupted. "You didn't ask. You assumed. And your assumption just triggered a corporate emergency protocol." He froze. "Emergency?" "Yes, Captain. You're trending globally. Someone on your flight live-streamed the confrontation. Over 80,000 viewers are watching it right now." He gripped the yoke, the blood draining from his face. "You're saying?" "I'm saying you've turned our anniversary flight into a PR disaster. Upon landing, you will cooperate fully with the board's investigation. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. For the remainder of this flight, you will speak to no one except your crew. Ms. Hayes will receive every courtesy our airline can offer. When you land in Dubai, corporate security will meet you at the gate. That's all." The line went dead. Cole pulled off his headset. The cockpit felt smaller now, the air heavier. His co-pilot stared straight ahead. "Sir, what are we going to do?" Cole's voice was hollow. "We're going to land this plane. That's all that's left to do." Back in the cabin, Elena approached Ms. Hayes again. Her hands trembled as she set a glass of orange juice on the tray. "Ma'am," she said softly, "corporate just confirmed your identity." I'm so sorry." Ms. Hayes looked at her kindly. "You don't owe me an apology, child. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't try to make me smaller." Elena's throat tightened. "Why didn't you tell us who you were?" Ms. Hayes smiled faintly. "Because people show their truth when they think you have none." She sipped the juice slowly, then looked around the cabin, the quiet passengers, the hum of engines, the pilot hidden behind the cockpit door. "All my life," she whispered, "I've watched people measure worth by uniforms and titles. But I've learned, respect isn't something you grant because of what's on someone's chest. It's something you carry in your own." The businessman beside her spoke quietly. "Ms. Hayes, I think the world's about to find out who you really are." She nodded. "Then maybe the world will also find out who they really are." Outside, sunlight streamed through the windows, cutting across the clouds like gold fire. Somewhere below, phones buzzed, screens refreshed, hashtags exploded. And above it all, in seat 1A, a 74-year-old woman with arthritis and unshakable grace sat silently, knowing that truth, once airborne, never stays hidden for long. What would you have done if you were on that plane? Comment below, your voice adds to the conversation. By the time Flight 107 crossed into European airspace, the world already knew. It started as a 30-second clip, grainy, shaky, filmed by a teenager in row 6A. The caption read, "Pilot screams at elderly black woman for holding up the flight." That was all it took. Within an hour, it was on every platform. Hashtag Loretta Hayes trended globally. Hashtag Air Grey scandal hit the front page of international news sites. Major outlets picked up the story before the plane even landed. Inside the cabin, passengers watched it unfold in real time. Wi-Fi screens lit up across the aisles. Some gasped, some turned pale, others looked at Ms. Hayes with the quiet awe reserved for people who are about to change history. She didn't look at any of them. Her eyes were fixed on the small Bible in her hands, fingers trembling just slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper. Resolve. Behind the cockpit door, Captain Cole sat in silence. He'd replayed that moment in his head 100 times already, her cane falling, his voice rising, the words he couldn't take back. "Ma'am, I said sit down or you'll delay my flight." The sentence echoed in his skull like thunder. He'd said, "my flight." Not our flight. Not the company's. His flight, as if the sky belonged to him alone. Now the company he thought he served was calling from above, and the woman he humiliated was about to redefine what ownership meant. 2 hours before landing, a notification pinged across every crew member's device. Mandatory directive, begin in-flight mediation protocol. Ms. Hayes to be briefed by pilot under supervision. Incident must be formally acknowledged before landing. Elena, the lead flight attendant, walked down the aisle to seat 1A, heart pounding. "Ma'am," she said softly, "the captain has requested to speak with you personally." Corporate, insisted on it. Ms. Hayes looked up, her eyes calm. "Then let him come." Moments later, Captain Cole emerged from the cockpit. The cabin went quiet again, the way a courtroom falls silent before a verdict. He stopped a few feet from her. Passengers leaned in without meaning to. Every phone was ready. Every breath, held. Cole cleared his throat. "Ms. Hayes. I came to offer you my formal apology for how I spoke to you earlier. My behavior was unprofessional, and I deeply regret my words." Her gaze was steady, her tone almost gentle. "Do you regret your words, Captain, or do you regret being seen?" The question hung in the air, heavy, impossible to dodge. He hesitated. suppose both. She nodded slowly. Then perhaps that's a start. Cole's voice cracked slightly. Ma'am, I didn't realize who you were. Had I known? Had you known, she interrupted softly, you'd have spoken differently. That's the problem. Her words weren't angry, they were surgical. Respect should not depend on recognition, Captain. If the only people you treat with dignity are those who can ruin you, then it's not dignity. It's calculation. The businessman in 1C let out an audible sigh. A passenger from the back whispered, Amen. Ms. Hayes folded her hands. Tell me, Captain. How long have you flown? 22 years, he said quietly. And how many passengers have you spoken to like that, passengers who couldn't defend themselves? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She leaned back. When I started this airline, I told my partners that every seat, from 1A to 32F, carried the same value. Not because of money, but because of humanity. I wonder what happened to that message. Her words were quiet, but they spread through the cabin like a current. Passengers weren't just watching a scene, they were witnessing a shift in power, live, thousands of feet above the earth. Cole's face was pale. You started this airline? Yes, she said. Before arthritis stole my knees, I built this company from the ground up. The name on the tail, Air Grace, came from my late husband's favorite verse. Grace in flight. Grace under pressure. Cole swallowed hard. Ma'am, But she raised her hand. Don't ma'am me now, Captain. I'm not your passenger. I'm your employer. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Phones shook. Someone whispered, she owns the airline. Cole stood there, stripped of every layer of authority he thought defined him. And then she said the words that would follow him for the rest of his life. Today, the man who thought he controlled the sky forgot who gave him his wings. By the time they began their descent, every news outlet had the story. BBC, airline CEO humiliated by her own pilot. CNN, racism at 30,000 feet. Forbes, Air Grace stock plummets 17% after viral incident. The airline's board had convened an emergency meeting mid-flight. Executives were scrambling to control damage, lawyers drafting statements before the wheels even touched the runway. In seat 1A, Loretta Hayes didn't speak again. She didn't need to. The world was speaking for her now. Cole sat frozen in the cockpit, voice trembling as he made the landing announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be touching down in Dubai in 20 minutes. On behalf of the crew, he stopped, then started again. On behalf of everyone on this aircraft, thank you for flying with us. The words rang hollow. When the wheels hit the tarmac, the cabin erupted, not in applause, but in whispers and camera clicks. Outside, through the small oval windows, news vans and security vehicles lined the runway. The truth had landed, and it was waiting for them. Cole stood in the doorway as passengers disembarked. Each one looked him in the eye, some with anger, others with pity. When Ms. Hayes reached the door, she paused beside him. Captain, she said quietly, I built this airline to prove that even those who've been stepped on can learn to fly. But it seems I forgot. Some people still need lessons in altitude. Then she walked away. Cole's voice cracked. Ms. Hayes, what happens now? She turned back just long enough to say, now, Captain, we see whether the sky still belongs to everyone. At the terminal, corporate security met the crew. Cole was escorted into a private conference room. Inside were 2 lawyers, 1 HR executive, and a speakerphone. Captain Cole, came the voice over the line, you are hereby suspended pending investigation into conduct unbecoming of company standards. Do you have anything to say? He tried to speak, but the words refused to come. Ms. Hayes has requested no immediate termination, the voice continued. She has something else in mind. The line clicked off. In another part of the terminal, Ms. Hayes was surrounded by journalists. One leaned forward with a microphone. Ms. Hayes, will the pilot be fired? She shook her head slowly. No. Fired men learn nothing. But educated men can change. The reporter blinked. So what happens next? She smiled faintly. A reckoning. Not of punishment, but of reflection. A lesson in what grace really means. The next morning, the world woke up to an official company statement. Air Grace announces Project Redemption, a company-wide initiative on racial bias, conduct, and human dignity. It included one final line. The first training will be led by Captain Richard Cole, under direct supervision of Ms. Loretta Hayes. The irony was poetic. The man who yelled at a passenger to move would now teach others never to repeat his mistake. But for Ms. Hayes, it wasn't about irony, it was about impact. She had no interest in humiliation. What she wanted was transformation. And somewhere, in the quiet of her hotel suite that night, as messages of support flooded her inbox, she whispered a prayer. Lord, let them see what dignity looks like, not when it's loud, but when it stands still. Share this story if you believe humility should fly higher than arrogance. When the corporate jet touched down in Dubai, a second boardroom waited, glass walls, desert light pouring through, every executive on edge. Loretta Hayes entered slowly, her cane clicking against marble like a metronome of patience. At the head of the table sat the interim board, investors, lawyers, communications chiefs. Ms. Hayes, one began carefully, the company is yours to direct. What are your terms? She looked out the window at the skyline shimmering beyond the runway. My terms, she said, are altitude. We rise together, or we ground ourselves in shame. A screen flickered on. The viral clip played in silence, Cole's raised voice, the passengers watching, the frail woman standing with her cane. Then Loretta pressed a remote. A second video appeared, her speech from 20 years earlier at the airline's founding. Air Grace will never forget the dignity of the people it carries. The two clips played side by side, the promise and the breach. No one spoke. She turned to the executives. You've asked what to do about him. I ask what we'll do about ourselves. The problem isn't one man's tone, it's the altitude we allow when we stop seeing people. She signed a document in front of them. Company Mandate 01, Humanity in Flight Initiative. 1. Every captain retrained under community mentors. 2. Scholarships for underrepresented youth in aviation. 3. A public statement signed by every executive acknowledging bias and renewal. Then she looked directly at Captain Cole. You will oversee it, Captain. You'll use your mistake to teach others how to keep the sky open. He bowed his head. I understand. No, she said softly, you will. Hours later, a live press conference. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Loretta stood at the podium, silver hair framed by lights, voice steady. I was judged unfit to board my own plane. But I choose not vengeance, only elevation. Today we change what flight means. She gestured to Cole, standing behind her. This man failed to see me, but he will help others learn to see. The room fell silent. Then applause, hesitant at first, then rising until it filled the hall. When it ended, she walked outside into the fading sunset. The sky glowed the color of forgiveness, gold melting into indigo. Elena, the attendant, hurried after her. Ms. Hayes, everyone's calling this the most powerful comeback in corporate history. Loretta smiled. It isn't a comeback, child. It's a landing. And I've been descending into grace all my life. Subscribe for more stories where truth rises above titles, and power finally meets grace. A week after the press conference, the story had settled into the bones of the world. The viral fury had cooled, replaced by something quieter, respect. Air Grace didn't just survive the scandal. It soared. People began calling it the airline that learned to listen. In cities across the world, billboards appeared with new words under the logo. Every passenger matters. Ms. Loretta Hayes watched from her porch in Atlanta as the evening news replayed her speech for the 1000th time. Her cane rested beside her rocking chair. Her knees ached, as always, but but her spirit felt light for the first time in years. The pain that had followed her up every staircase, down every hallway, through every boardroom, it finally meant something. The phone rang. She smiled as she answered. "Yes, Captain." Richard Cole's voice was different now, lower, slower, stripped of command. "Ms. Hayes," he said, "the first training session finished this morning. 32 pilots. Not one left the room the same way they entered." She chuckled softly. "And you, Captain? Did you leave the same?" A pause. Then, "No, ma'am. I think I finally saw what altitude really is." Loretta's smile warmed her entire face. "Altitude isn't height, son. It's heart. You don't fly higher by climbing, you fly higher by humbling." He was quiet a long moment before whispering, "Thank you for not grounding me permanently." She looked out at the horizon where the sky turned to fire. "I didn't build this airline to ground people. I built it to lift them." Weeks later, Loretta boarded a short domestic flight, quiet, anonymous, no fanfare this time. As she settled into her seat, a young trainee pilot approached to greet her. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said shyly. "I'm in Captain Cole's mentorship program. I just wanted to say, your story's the reason I believed I could do this." She smiled. "Then make sure no one ever doubts it again." The engines roared to life. The plane began to ascend. Through the window, the city shrank to a pattern of light and motion, tiny, fragile, beautiful. Her arthritic hands rested over her Bible. The gold sunlight washed over her face like blessing. Later that evening, she opened an email from corporate headquarters. Subject line, "Final Draft, Humanity in Flight Initiative." The document began with a quote in bold. "Every name on the manifest carries a story. Our duty is to treat each one as if it's written in gold." And at the bottom, a signature. "Captain Richard Cole, Lead Instructor, Air Grace Ethics Division." She smiled. Then she typed a single reply. "Approved. Let's keep flying higher." That night, the news aired a final headline. "From humiliation to healing, how one woman redefined the skies." But she wasn't watching anymore. She was on her porch again, breathing the soft night air, eyes tracing the faint trail of a plane gliding across the stars. Her neighbor waved from next door. "Ms. Hayes. That your airline up there?" She smiled, eyes never leaving the sky. "It's everyone's airline now." And as the plane disappeared into the dark, her voice carried one last truth. Power means nothing if it can't lift others. Grace means everything when it does. Somewhere above the Atlantic, a single plane cut across the darkness, its lights blinking like a heartbeat against the stars. No headlines now. No cameras. Just the hush of altitude and the soft rhythm of trust restored. Inside, passengers slept in peace. No one knew that the woman whose vision made their flight possible once limped up these aisles, cane tapping, patience tested. No one saw the years she carried, the ache in her knees, or the weight of every door that had once been closed to her. But she saw them, all of them. And that was enough. The world often measures power by who commands the sky, who speaks loudest, who wears the stripes, who gets to say we board by zones. But Loretta Hayes taught us something else. That altitude is not about height, it's about heart. That you don't rise by standing over others, you rise by seeing them. Her story became more than a headline. It became a mirror. For everyone who has ever judged before knowing, for everyone who's been dismissed before speaking, and for everyone who's been told they didn't belong in first class, or any class at all. When the world looked up, it saw more than an airline scandal. It saw an old truth written in new wings. That grace, when it moves through people, can change entire systems. Loretta's name may fade from the news cycle, but her lesson won't. It lives in every uniform stitched with respect, every boarding call spoken with care, every pilot who remembers that power without empathy always crashes. So the next time someone moves slower than you, the next time you see a person who looks like they don't belong where you think they do, pause. Because the sky has room for all of us. And you never know whose flight you're really boarding. Grace is not weakness. It's altitude. If this story moves you, share it. Not for likes or views, but because somewhere someone needs to know that regardless of their position everyone should be treated fairly.